earnest money? It's probably a term you have never heard of unless you have purchased a home. Today, we are diving into what is earnest money, how does it work, and I'm going to share with you how earnest money can help you win the deal, even when you aren't the highest offer. Let's do it. What's up, everybody? It is a glorious day here in Atlanta, Georgia. The sun is shining. It's supposed to be 74 outside today, and it's March. It's hard to beat the Georgia weather. But today's topic isn't weather, it's earnest money. If you are thinking about buying a home in Georgia, this term is going to come up and you should know what it means because it's kind of a big deal. Earnest money, sometimes called good faith money, is money put down by the buyer of a house to demonstrate that they are serious about buying the home. It kind of works like a deposit on a home. There are a number of things to know about earnest money, and let's start with who holds the earnest money. When making an offer on a home, there is a place in the contract to state who the holder of the earnest money is. The holder has to have an escrow account where this money stays until closing on the home or until a contract is terminated and that money is released out. The holder of that earnest money can be the buyer's agent's brokerage, the listing agent's brokerage, or the closing attorney that you're closing with. For reasons we won't dive into today, if you are a buyer, you would rather your buyer's agent's office hold that money or the attorney hold it. If you're a seller, you would rather have the listing agent's office hold the money or the attorney. When does this money need to be turned in? Well, you can actually give the earnest money to whomever is holding that earnest money before or at the time you submit your offer on a home. You can also wait to turn this money in after an offer has been accepted. Once again, we have a place on the contract that states when the money is supposed to be turned in. Now, the big question is, how much earnest money should you try to put down when purchasing a house? Well, just like everything in real estate, this is negotiable. There is no standard. What I do see oftentimes, though, is when offers are submitted for my listings that I have, we get usually offers that have around 1% of the purchase price in earnest money. So if you're purchasing a $400,000 home, then oftentimes you'll see $4,000 in earnest money. The question is 1% down enough earnest money? Let's talk about what happens to earnest money first, and then I'll come back to this topic. Let's go ahead and say that a contract has been accepted by a buyer and a seller, and the earnest money has been deposited. This money is now in an escrow account. There are still a lot of steps to go before closing on a home. In our scenario, let's say that the buyer has put 5 days due diligence, 14 days financing contingency, and 17 days for an appraisal contingency. If the buyer breaks contract during the 5 days of due diligence, which the buyer has the right to do for any reason, then the buyer will get their earnest money back. Once due diligence has ended, there are only a few other protections for the buyer to protect their earnest money. If the buyer cannot get financing within 14 days in our scenario, through no fault of their own, and the reason for not getting financing falls in the contract language, then the buyer can get their earnest money back. If the home does not appraise in our scenario in 17 days, and the buyer and the seller cannot come to an agreement on the price, then the buyer can also get their earnest money back. Last thing is, if the seller is in breach of contract for any reason and the buyer does not want to proceed with the purchase of the home, the buyer can also get their earnest money back. Now, it's a little more nuanced than what I just shared, but that's the gist of it. If the buyer goes all the way to closing and closes on the house, then the earnest money is just applied to the money that's needed to purchase that home. Now, this all sounds good for the buyer, so what's the catch? Well, the catch is, what happens if the buyer breaks contract on a house for a reason not given in the contract? If that is done, then the seller has the right to the earnest money and the seller would receive that earnest money. This acts like compensation for the seller if the buyer is in breach of contract. Now that I've broken that down a little bit for you, what I have to share now will make a little more sense. When buying or selling a home, the earnest money can show how serious a buyer is about purchasing that home. The more money a buyer is willing to put into earnest money, the more serious they are about purchasing a home. As a seller, what would you rather have? $4,000 in earnest money on a contract or $40,000 in earnest money? As a buyer, which one makes you look more serious about purchasing a home? You may ask yourself, who has that much money to put down? Well, if you're purchasing a home, you already are paying closing costs more than likely, which is about 3% of the price of the home. You also, if you're purchasing a $400,000 home for, let's say, 10% down, then you have another $40,000 that you're putting down as a down payment. If you as a buyer already have that amount of money and the earnest money goes towards a down payment and closing costs, then why not go ahead and put it down as earnest money? And yes, the amount of money you're putting down as a buyer in earnest money can win you a deal. When homes right now are receiving 20 plus offers, what will help your offer stand out? Well, putting a large amount of earnest money down will help you out a ton. So make sure you talk with your agent about earnest money, how it's protected, and what is at risk. If you are in the process of purchasing a home right now, I highly suggest you watch this video right here. If you found this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We talk about all things real estate as well as living, working, playing, and breathing all things Atlanta and the Metro Atlanta area. Thanks, and I will see you next time.